It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and we're going to continue this lab series with something more gut specific today. So I want to talk about, I have this why you're bloated concept weaved through here, but obviously there are a lot of different gut GI symptoms, correlations, downstream impact of gut dysbiosis or just imbalance of the gut. So I want to talk about how we work through this from a functional lab perspective when we're looking at a GI map, which is a stool test, your actual blood panel, and what that can tell us about your gut health and just the overall gut patterns and correlations with symptoms that I think a lot of people tend to miss. And I think one of the most common conversations I have these days is it's about a very specific product and supplement, which they must be doing a very good job at marketing. But I have so many women that say, I'm bloated all the time. I'm so irregular. I feel inflamed, all of these different symptoms. And they're like, but I take seed symbiotic, and that's like the gold standard of probiotic in the market. And I always think about a client who came to us and she's very like health conscious, health aware, good knowledge base. And she was taking this probiotic and she's like, this is a really good one. And when we ran her test on her gut, she was actually significantly overgrown on the bacterial strain that is seed symbiotic product. So it just goes to show you that these things are so individual, and your gut microbiome has tons of bacteria and different strains and all of these things. And the balance, how you balance it and how you go about it is different for everybody. Now, of course, foundationally, we have to look at your food and the environment that you live in, your eating habits, right? Your meal timing, your meal size, your meal quality, your overall calorie intake has an impact, right? Because people say all the time, I eat healthy and they eat 1,200 calories. And I'm like, I'm glad you're eating your fruits and veggies, but like, that's not enough, right? Or I know that I was very guilty of, I eat the same foods all day, every day. And I thought that was like a gold star. And then I realized your gut microbiome can
diversity,
suffer, right? Yeah, I don't have that diversity. And it's interesting. I actually remember one of the first trainings I did with a really great practitioner learning about the gut. And she was like, listen, variety could even be different apples, like, right? Like you love Honeycrisp, but maybe you have a Gala, or maybe you have a red Fuji apple, whatever it is. That is even enough like variety. So just to give you some context on what variety means, it could even be things like that, right? But we just want lots of colors, lots of variety to support your gut microbiome. However, if you get to a place where you're bloated and all of these things, sometimes you can have reduced digestive capacity or an inflammatory response to foods that maybe you didn't used to. And that doesn't mean you're just developing all these food sensitivities and allergies. It means there's something in your gut that needs to be addressed. So,
and sometimes it's even healthy foods, which can be so frustrating when you're like, what the heck? I'm eating really well, but then I'm having these reactions. And I used to be there where it was like, well, I guess I just have a sensitivity to black beans and I just will eat them less and less, even though I like them and they're healthy. Some people I feel like onions and garlic are a very common one that we see. But it's so common for people to take a food sensitivity test and then be like, okay, I'm just going to cut this food out forever. Where in fact, if we could heal your gut and your gut lining, then you could reintroduce those foods back in. You would absorb the nutrients from them properly. You would digest them properly, and you wouldn't have the issues anymore. So it may take a short-term sacrifice or a specific protocol, clean it up, and then wow, now the world is your oyster again when it comes to food and balance. And Jill kind of touched on this, but the gut reflects the environment that it is functioning in, just like everything else we talked about. So when we talk about some of the tests that we're going to talk about today and some of the trends in your labs and all, it's a snapshot of what is going on right now, right? Now, years of habits and all could have led you to this place where, okay, we're more inflamed. Stress can lead to more gut permeability. There's lots of these other factors. Maybe I ate something bad in Mexico and now I have some sort of bad like pathogen type bacteria. However, it's a snapshot in time. So if we can if your symptoms are so bad that we really need to address it specifically, awesome. Let's clean it up and let's get you back to a good place. However, it's really important to maintain the diversity of whole foods, the lowering your stress inputs, all of these things that helped us heal, so that it doesn't go back to a bad place as soon as it's exposed to something when you get takeout one day, right? We want to maintain that in that healthy environment, because I think I've seen that before, where we have somebody who executes a gut protocol really, really well. They feel good. Then like 6 to 8 months later, they're like, oh no, the gut protocol didn't work because now I feel like crap again. And I'm like, well, you've kind of been fueling your body like crap now for 3 or 4 months, and maybe we're putting it back into a different type of stressed out state. And we've rerun tests for some people where it's like, well, you did clean up that other one, and now you have a different issue because you're still running on this crazy lifestyle, and we need to go back to the basics, right? So again, I say that just to set appropriate expectations, but if you can get back to baseline and feel better, my gosh, it helps in so many other areas. In terms of nutrient absorption and brain fog and energy and all these other things. So, okay, that's all I want to.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think too that like, the other things that could happen, that let's say you go through a gut protocol, you heal things, and then you end up in a place that you don't feel good again. There are a lot of factors with that. To Jess's point, if you just go back to eating and living and behaving the way that you were before that drove you to gut dysfunction in the first place, obviously you can wind up in the same spot. But it could be things like you have to take an antibiotic for another like totally unrelated issue in your life. And now you've killed off all the good bacteria, or all of the bad bacteria, but also the good bacteria. And now that led to dysbiosis and overgrowth of things, or high stress, or if you have terrible habits with artificial sweeteners or energy drinks or all of these things, then that can break down the integrity of your gut lining, right? And that's like leaky gut, right? Where things are getting in where they shouldn't, out when they shouldn't. And that can create an environment of dysbiosis, or all of these things. Food poisoning, right? You get food poisoning, it sucks. Now you've got an overgrowth of something. Maybe you do antibiotics, or maybe you just rebalance naturally. So
that doesn't mean you're just going to be like lean and not bloated forever, right? Like it might be a couple days before my period and I'm a little more bloated. That doesn't mean my gut is now way off again after I've just healed it. It's like, well, that's normal. Let's pay attention to the cyclical nature of it. Or if I don't drink very frequently, if I have an alcoholic drink and then I'm a little bloated the next day, I don't freak out and think, oh no, something's wrong with my gut. It's like, well, I just put poison in my body last night. So that's what just happened, right? Like, so again, we're zooming out and we're looking at all of these environmental factors, not just one thing. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the patterns here.
Yep. So going through this isn't like hard and fast. Oh, if you have pain here, this is the problem. But we kind of look at it by location, right? So like the upper GI tract, small intestine, and then large intestine, colon, right? So it could be, I think SIBO is very common these days, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And one of the reasons that I think we're starting to have a lot more awareness around these things is, one, just access to information, which I think is obviously a blessing and a curse. But I also think with the rise of the use of GLPs and the slowing of motility and gastric emptying, that we are starting to, at least I know within the Fueled's practice, we're starting to have a lot of influx, a larger influx of women coming to us on or post GLP saying, I'm so bloated, I can't eat anything. You're telling me to eat more food, but I can't. I physically can't fit any more food. It's like, all right, we got to see what's going on. So that could be the root cause, right? Just the slowing of all of the digestive function. But sometimes it could be other things even driving the slow motility, right? So those are the things that, like thyroid, right? Thyroid can have an impact on those things even. So we have to look at like, all right, what are the patterns that we actually see? And there are also things like if you have low stomach acid, right? So PPIs are
a common one where we can like
one of the most
we can
common.
Easily be like, okay, this is probably going to fix it temporarily. And we could do little tests.
At least try that.
Yeah.
Yep. So like PPIs are often given for, reflux, heartburn, those types of things. That's oftentimes driven actually by not enough acid versus too much acid. But then when you put PPIs in the mix, it's further lowering acid. And now, I saw a client one time who came to me, and a typical daily dose of vitamin D is 5,000 IU. She was on 100,000 IU of vitamin D, and her vitamin D levels weren't increasing. And I'm like,
Why do we keep adding more then?
Yeah, you're not absorbing it. Like what else? What's the problem here? And it doesn't mean low stomach acid is, but it certainly could contribute. So those are the kind of the patterns and things that we want to look at. But I think stomach acid is definitely one of the most common that we see.
And then Lord,
go ahead.
I also wanted to backtrack and say, hey, to give you guys tangible takeaways, this is not going to solve the problem. However, we can do some simple tests that you can do on yourself. If you suspect that you may have SIBO specifically, switch to a low FODMAP diet for a week. And if your bloating goes down, you probably do have it. Maybe you escalate to, okay, next steps, let's treat it as if it's SIBO. If you suspect low stomach acid, you can add apple cider vinegar on an empty stomach in the morning and or before meals. If you're bloating and your reflux goes down, likely you do have low stomach acid because we just added an acidic thing in the environment and it fixed it, right? So again, that does not solve your problem forever. That is not healing the root cause. That's an easy test we can do without having to run a several $100 test to get a little bit more information. And we're putting those puzzle pieces together.
And then ultimately, to Jess's point, we can address the problem, but we have to know what drove the problem so that we can prevent it from happening again. So with like low stomach acid, we might look at a blood panel and see CO2 can be useful in that in and of itself if there's imbalance there. Like I said, looking at things like vitamin D or just low nutrients in general on a blood panel can give us like an indicator of like, do we need to look at this? Are there gut symptoms we need to correlate with? Are there signs on the blood panel? MCV, MCH, MCHC can all give us indicators of like some absorption issues, especially if we're looking at upper GI symptoms that are present, which would be
like acid reflux,
with that.
Acid reflux. So, I mean, sometimes that's also a bloating type thing, but I feel like more acid refluxy type symptoms. Like I have a client who like physically gets sick sometimes when she's eating. And it's like, absolutely. As soon as we added in apple cider vinegar, it went away. And it's like, okay, cool. We know what path now to look for more when we go and get her testing.
Mm-hmm. And then the other things too are if there are certain markers on a blood panel that are low or imbalanced, we can look at things that indicate inflammation. We can look at things of low protein intake. And a lot of times, if you have reduced digestive capacity, protein can be harder to break down for your body, right? So sometimes women will naturally undereat or naturally veer away from certain foods that we don't want them to, like protein, right? And then all of a sudden they don't realize they're doing that consciously, but they just know, okay, that makes me uncomfortable. So they naturally eat less of it. So those are the types of patterns that we're looking for. And then if we're looking at magnesium or zinc or B12 or iron and ferritin, like, are we getting the nutrients, but just not absorbing them? Those are the kind of patterns that we want to look at in that context of, if we're getting these nutrients in the first place. And then if we are we not absorbing them or using them effectively within the body? And then obviously if somebody is presenting with gut symptoms, then we know, all right, there are deeper things that we can look at here.
Did you touch on, I know you kind of said, hey, if we're organizing it by location, you talked about upper GI and stomach acid, small intestine, SIBO, large intestine. Did we cover that at a high level yet or?
Yeah, so we can jump to, okay, so small intestine real quick with SIBO. Generally speaking, you're going to see bloating right after eating. You're going to feel that like pressure, trapped gas feeling. Jess mentioned like higher FODMAP foods. You're going to be more reactive to those things.
And for anybody listening, FODMAP is just an acronym for like specific types of starches. So the frustrating part here is a lot of these starches are in healthy foods. Beans, apples, onions, garlic. If you tend to notice bloating right after those things, that's a pretty good indication of you might have SIBO.
I think it's also important to note too that you can technically have a food reaction it's not always instant, right? It could be a day later, it could be 2 days later, in terms of food reactivity. I mean, typically if you bloat right after eating,
for SIBO, it's more,
it's more immediate. If you have bloating when you wake up in the morning that progressively gets worse through the day, that's another indicator that could be correlated. And then we also look at, again, what is that person's history? Are they somebody who identifies as I've been constipated my whole life, or they had a ton of food poisoning in the past, or they were on antibiotics chronically as a kid for issues, or long-term calorie restriction and dieting? Are they a very type A high stress person, right? So like those are the other things that we look at to correlate and say, all right, cool, we can visibly see what the problem is on the test and the GI map itself, but what got us here? Like what else do we need to like look at and unpack?
And I'm going to intervene. I wish I said this at the beginning, but like, when we're talking about these symptoms, we're talking about it in the context of somebody who eats fairly healthy, who is doing quote unquote all the right things, because our first area is always, okay, let's look at your fiber intake. Let's look at your water. Are we eating some fruits and vegetables every day, right? We're looking at those things first, and we are trying to pull back stress and inflammation and that sort of thing in terms of like the basics. If it persists, then we go this additional route. Okay. So like I have 3 clients right now actually who have executed spot on perfect reverse diet build phases. And they're at about like 2 months in, and they're at higher calories. They've reduced stress. They're doing all the right things. They've improved their nutrient quality, and their symptoms are persisting. Typically those symptoms will go down just from doing those things. If symptoms persist, okay, now we need to dig deeper. I say that because you don't want to go skip right to a GI map if you're only drinking 20 ounces of water a day. Like go drink water first and see if your symptoms improve, right? Sure. So that's all. I wanted to give that caveat.
Yeah, that's good. And then with large intestine, and again, these are not black and white. Like there's obviously can be overlap and imbalance across the gut in multiple areas, right? But we want to look at things like irregular stools. Are you able to get everything out that needs to get out? Skin issues, brain fog, fatigue, some of that immune reactivity. Generally speaking, within the gut, if you are estrogen dominant, right, it could be that we're not clearing things out with the enzymes in the right, like the right amount of those enzymes to do that job, right, and complete that cycle. So those are the other indicators that we want to look at and correlate. But again, to Jess's point, healthy food choices don't just automatically equate to a healthy, balanced gut, especially if your intake is just generally too low. And it also shouldn't be a case of you have to restrict calories forever or avoid certain foods forever. Obviously, there are cases where there's a genuine sensitivity or allergy, and obviously that's a different conversation, but you shouldn't just have to avoid trigger foods. Yeah.
I would say it's pretty rare in terms of however many women I've spoken to who think they have to not have a food for the rest of their life. Like most of them, we can probably heal it, and I've seen it happen.
Yeah. So the GI map is kind of our tried and true and our go-to based on the sensitivity of the levels and the technology that they use, so that we can actually see the amounts that we need to see effectively in terms of like trace levels of an organism, so that we're seeing as much as we possibly can.
And we've run other tests with clients in the past. Like I'm a fan of the Tiny Health test as well, but it's different. So it's like measuring 2 different things in the gut. So that one's more like a general abundance. Let's look at your gut ecosystem. Okay, we have some abundance of this. We have lower abundance of this. It gives very specific action items in terms of what foods, like, okay, if you are low in this, generally have more fermented foods, and it gives you examples. So if you are not working with a coach, that's an easy one where it's like, okay, I can change some of my foods. The GI map is more of a specific, okay, it's actually a quantitative test to tell us exactly how much microbiome of each of these different strands is in there. It's more of like a diagnostic tool. It's better at seeing if there's parasites, if there's antibiotic resistant strains of things, stuff like that.
Yeah, Tiny Health does a good job of telling you like the potential of things that could be imbalanced, or the potential or what you might be prone to in your gut in your current health state. So yeah, I think they both have a time and a place. So we can see things like H. pylori on a GI map, which I think is probably pretty well known, but we want to see, do we have putting in air quotes, bad or opportunistic bacteria, those bacteria where we don't want to see an abundance of them, or there are certain strains where we don't want to see them at all. There are those commensal bacteria, are the ones that are just essential and good that we do want more of. That a lot of times, if bad bacteria overgrows, and then the putting in air quotes good or commensal bacteria there's not enough, right? Because they're being overtaken and overpowered by the bad bacteria. And then they look at things like immunity, inflammatory markers, digestive markers, parasites. There's things we can look at with your gut lining. And again, enzyme activity like beta glucuronidase, which again is what helps like get estrogen out, right? Excess estrogen versus it recirculating in your body. So those are the different things that we're looking at on a GI map report like that. So we want to look at
This does not replace a colonoscopy. So if you, like I had a client who is in her mid 50s and had a colonoscopy scheduled. She has a bunch of gut stuff going on. And I'm like, we really should maybe order a test soon. And she's like, oh, should I cancel this? No, because they're looking at a physical image of your system. So if you have polyps or if you have something going on there, that's seeing that. This is a poop sample you're sending to a lab and they're saying, okay, what's going on in there? So they're looking at completely different slices of health, right? So that's important. Also, just generally speaking, our gut is so much more involved in like mental health too than we think. So anytime you're thinking of like, well, I don't really have any bloat. Okay, but do you have skin reactivity? A lot of times, any sort of immune flare-up type things like that can be identified and tied back to the gut, but also mental health and neurotransmitter production. A lot of that is in the gut, not just in the brain. So I think I spoke earlier about like you can have better, like less brain fog, more clarity, less ADD type symptoms, less anxiety. A lot of these, and again, we are not psychiatrists, right? We're not going into it trying to treat anything. However, a lot of the times our clients end up coming off of protocols like this and being like, oh my gosh, my doctor lowered my antidepressant dose because I'm feeling that much better, or my sleep is way better now. Or so again, I just want to, the gut is really, really super tied to brain health.
No, that's a good point. So I think upwards of 90% of serotonin is synthesized in the gut. So gut bacteria can produce precursors for dopamine, to Jess's point, when we're talking about ADHD, coming from ADHD queen and former Adderall user herself. And the gut-brain axis is critical, right? They communicate constantly. So if there is inflammation or imbalances that can lead to, leaky gut, allowing toxins to enter the bloodstream, which then can in turn cause systemic inflammation and then can affect neurological function, right? So it really is all connected. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this is about more than just, are you bloated? Are you not?
This isn't about, it's not just about GI symptoms. It's about like root cause health. Like a lot of tech, and we talked about, did we talk about liver? Did we do a liver episode yet in this series? So when we're working upstream, a lot of times it's, okay, first we want to clean up your liver so that your liver detoxes the way it's supposed to, right? In a healthy environment. Our next look is typically this gut stuff, because a lot of times this then trickles down to people becoming insulin resistant or having thyroid issues or having the systemic inflammation or the lack of nutrient absorption. There's so much that could be going on here. It just gives us a really good, clear picture of the puzzle.
Yep. And then on a GI map itself, the bacterial findings are listed in scientific notation. So we might see 4.8 E5, right? Which means times 10 to the fifth power, right? So there is all of this bacteria, millions of bacteria, and that correlates up against each different bacterial strain, right? So it might tell you, hey, this one is here, but it's not technically over the threshold yet, right? So H. pylori is a great example of this, where we might see it and it's there and it's present, which is not uncommon. But as long as they aren't symptomatic and it's not exceeding the threshold limit, right, that's noted on a GI map, then we might just monitor something like that, right? So it's not like, oh my God, this is bad, this is there. There are times where like H. pylori, for example, is present, but it's not causing an issue.
And I've had clients who they're just under the high threshold, but they do have really bad symptoms. So then, okay, we're going to treat it, because also sometimes H. pylori can hide in your gut lining. So it might not show the full abundance of it. So then maybe we recommend a supplement that breaks up the gut barrier, that mucosa, a little bit to help kill it off more, right? So we said this before in our blood test episode, but we're looking at the person, their inputs, and these tests, not the test alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And then beyond just bacterial counts on the GI map, we're looking at digestive function. So markers like pancreatic elastase and steatocrit can help us think through digestive capacity, enzyme output. Are we able to break down what's coming in, right? Because the pancreas is important when it comes to digestion. We're looking at immune activity. So secretory IgA gives us a look at that mucosal lining and output. Markers like calprotectin can help us assess, is there active inflammation right now with gut irritation? And then barrier related patterns. There's a marker zonulin, which is not actually on every GI map. It's an add-on, but it can help give a little bit more clarity and context on barrier, gut barrier and lining integrity. And then again, the hormone clearance piece is so big when it comes to gut and liver, but the beta glucuronidase is again, specifically when we're looking at estrogen clearance, this recirculation patterns, constipation, right? If you're not pooping, you're not getting that extra, the toxins out, right? The excess stuff that we don't want in there anymore. And then if it's recirculating, now we have toxins circulating, excess estrogen circulating. And obviously, then we have somebody who's coming to us saying, okay, I have XYZ gut patterns and all of these things, but I also have horrible PMS and periods and all of these things. Great. We got to look at the gut first, right? So many people are so quick to be like, I need to cycle sync. I need to do X, Y, and Z for my hormones. And it's usually hormones are downstream, right? We still have to look upstream at the gut. And then even when we're looking at the gut, we got to look further upstream and say, like, all right, what got us here in the first place? So, yeah, the GI map can tell us a lot of different things. And then obviously pathogens, overgrowths, yeast, fungus, anything opportunistic, all of the whole picture, right? And then correlating it with symptoms and then your blood work ultimately too. So we want to look at, is there overgrowth? Is there infection, inflammation, just poor digestive capacity? Is there an immunity strain that we have to look at? Because that's going to be important to address as well. Is it just a poor clearance issue? Typically it's a combination, and then correlating that with symptoms. And again, your meal timing, your food reactivity. Do you have skin symptoms, or histamine-like reactions, hormonal symptoms, medication history, your blood work? All of that has to bring everything together. So,
also, I think it's helpful working with somebody who understands the order of operation in terms of how to go about healing your gut too. I say this because I'm one of those like do-it-yourself learners who's like, I'll go watch a YouTube video and then I'll order it myself and I'll just figure it out. If I were to read my GI map tomorrow and I saw that I was low on good bacteria, I'd be like, okay, what am I supposed to take? And maybe I'll go take some of those probiotics that I'm low on, and then maybe I'll take a killer at the same time, an antimicrobial for the bad stuff, and I'll think I'm doing great, right? Meanwhile, I maintain the same diet. That wouldn't work because we need to do it in a particular order. So typically what it looks like is we start with a kill phase. So we're starting with okay, we want to get rid of the bad pathogens first. The length of time that might take depends on the abundance and how many pathogens and which pathogens. If it's a specific pathogen versus another, we may recommend dietary changes along with it. I tend to always recommend no gluten and no alcohol through one of these protocols, just so that your gut lining can stay a little bit more secure and so that we're not dumping on the liver during these. Then after our kill phase, okay, now we can replenish and repopulate some of the good stuff. Now we can get your body naturally producing more stomach acid on its own. Okay, now after that, now that we've repopulated the stuff, we want to really continue with a couple supplements that help heal the gut lining itself, help secure up that permeability if there's issues there. So we're doing it in a very strategic order of operations. I say that again because, and I am one of those people who's like, okay, I want to learn it myself. I'll figure it out. And then I end up still having issues like, why didn't this work? Oh, well, because when I was doing it that way, I was not doing it effectively. So I think people become jaded because they're like, well, I already did a gut protocol. And I'm like, well, talk to me about what it looked like. Okay, I love all the supplements that this other person had you on, but they had you at 1,000 calories a day.
Yes.
Okay, that's a stressor on the gut. I might do it this way, right? Or, okay, they gave you this, but they didn't go through this other phase to reduce inflammation. So your autoimmune symptoms are flaring up more because we didn't address the inflammation thing first. So it doesn't necessarily mean that protocol didn't work. It means we're not looking at big picture. We're not zooming out enough, and we're just trying to treat versus get your whole system to chill out, then tackle it one at a time.
I think that's such a good point, because I have had so many conversations with clients that are like, well, I took that before and my body didn't respond well, or I did this and it didn't work. And it's like, hold on, because the order that you did it in a different context matters. Yeah. If you took a supplement and your body wasn't ready for it, or it was too much, right? Like, if you have a significant immune reactivity right now and skin issues and all of this other stuff, we have to make sure we calm your immune system, because if I try to detox you when your immune system is in overdrive, you're going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to, it's why I think a lot of clients and individuals lose trust with practitioners, rightfully so, right? But we have to look at the full picture and make sure that, yeah, I might recommend things that you've done or air quotes tried in the past, but we have to do it effectively and in the right order. So I think that's such a good point. And then blood work. So I touched on this a little bit, but like there are markers obviously for like absorption and nutritional strain. So like, again, if we have low nutrient status, immune burden, inflammatory markers that are giving us those red flags, then we have to look at what's going on in the gut, right? So it's not like, MCV tells me X, Y, and Z is going on in the gut. There's not that type of correlation. It's just looking at the full picture to say, what is driving this problem and the symptom that this person is having. And then the ones that I look at most specifically on a gut or on blood work when I'm working on somebody's gut or with any client, obviously, eosinophils we can correlate that with parasitic burden, histamine patterns, any immune reactivity. Basophils can, again, support that picture around histamine, immune type of response, monocytes, lymphocytes. Again, this is all like immunity, inflammation, chronic versus acute infection burden, long-standing irritation, or just a viral and unrelated thing, right? But it's still important to look at all of that.
That's what I was going to say was viral or unrelated is we're looking at patterns and we're looking at symptoms. Just because if you hear this episode and you hear that one of these things, oh, that was high on my last one. Okay, did you have a common cold during that time that you got it? Because if one of these markers is high, that's not a red flag, right? We're looking at patterns.
So to that point, again, when we're correlating all of this, we want to look at symptoms. We want to look at the blood panel. We want to look at all of these things in somebody's history. And again, there's a specific order of operations once we get all of this together of like, what do we need to work on first, right? So a lot of times people might be like, I'm estrogen dominant and I really want to work on my hormones. And it's like, we are like, this is what we're doing, right? When we're addressing your gut. But we need to kill off the bad stuff so that we can give your gut the space it needs to maybe regrow good bacteria, or we need to kill off parasites before we try to repopulate, or sometimes we need to titrate things very slowly so that we don't get into a state of overgrowing good bacteria and then creating a new problem. Gut lining, like we want to course correct there and make sure that we, close the package up, tape it up and ship it off so that we don't, have things just coming and going and continuously being an issue. If you're not pooping, there's no point in putting you through any type of detox correction protocol if we can't get out what we need to get out. So again, we have to look at that full picture, the behaviors of a person. And it might be a matter of it might make more sense to clean up food quality and fiber and sleep and water and stress and slowly increase somebody's calories and then get you to a place where we can focus on healing. Or maybe just literally in your life, you're not in a place to execute a full gut protocol, right? Then it's like, what things can we do to mitigate some of these symptoms in the meantime to get you comfortable and moving in the right direction? If you're like, I can't take all these supplements or I can't do all these things. I mean, I think if you are not feeling good, then healing obviously should be a priority, but who am I?
What's the risk reward, right? Yeah. Like it needs to get bad enough to be like, yeah, I'm willing to tackle it now, right?
What it takes, yeah.
Because they are usually pretty intensive protocols. However, man, again, speaking from personal experience, the payoff on the back end is like, why did I not do it sooner? I feel so much better. And I didn't realize it had this trickle down to me feeling less achy after my workouts and having less inflammation. And like, it's all this other stuff, being able to focus better. I didn't realize that my gut being off had those until I felt better.
Yep. And then we want to look at, again, medication history. So antibiotics currently or previously, if so, when was the last time that was a factor? GLP medications. We actually have a lot of women that come to us, and I think GLP has become so mainstream that we're like digging on these intake calls, right? Of like, do you do this? Have you tried this? Has this ever been a thing? And we're kind of scratching our heads, and I'm like, have you ever taken a GLP? And they're like, yeah, I'm on one now. And I'm like, oh my God.
They're like, oh, I forgot to mention that to you. And we're like, if we're giving you nutrition recommendations, it's kind of important to know, but that explains a lot. So now we just flat out ask it on our intake form because people are like nervous to tell us. And it's like, that's okay if you're on it, but we need to then
I gotta help you.
And we need to be super intentional about motility, because there will be that slowing in your GI tract. We need to be
I'm not going to be force feeding you if you can't get food in and your dose is
right. There's no point. If you're trying to be in a deficit, why are we trying to fight a reverse diet if you didn't tell us that that's the choice you're making? Again, at the end of the day, maybe we'd recommend a different path, but we're at least going to make sure you're lifting weights and getting enough protein so you don't lose muscle. So anyway, we're looking at like history of antibiotics, GLP-1 medication, laxative dependence. I have a lot of clients who are like, no, I'm fine because I just take Metamucil every day. And it's like, you shouldn't have to do that. And again, I'm speaking from experience as somebody, I was on antibiotics my entire childhood for kidney issues. And every doctor was like, you have IBS, take Metamucil. Literally my entire childhood. It was like, drink water and take Metamucil over and over and over again. And then I actually healed my gut and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have so many less mood swings because I'm pooping regularly and getting toxic stuff out of my system.
Yeah. And like I mentioned PPIs earlier, people who take any like antacids, right?
Yeah.
They might have been doing that for so long and for so many years that it's not even like on their brain, right? But I tell everyone when they sign on with us, I'm like, listen, for this intake, I need you to like get a cup of tea, get cozy with a blanket on Friday night and take your time and fill this out, because the more that you give us, the more clarity we have, and we can help you to the absolute highest capacity that we can with as much information as possible. So dental procedures, previous surgeries, like all of those things we're going to ask you, because it might not tell us, it might not be a thing where we're like, we got to do this instead. It might just be, maybe this drove this and this drove this and this is how we got here, right? And maybe we can't do anything about it, but it's still really helpful so that we know what's the root cause, and if we course correct this, how do we make sure we don't come back here? So all of that
is actually important. That's something that I've had happen 2 different times, where I had a client who I didn't know she had this other issue going on, and like we're through a protocol. The protocol reduces the symptoms, and then the symptoms come back, and I'm scratching my head, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, I have had this infection for this completely unrelated issue that I didn't get treated," or, "Oh yeah, by the way, I have this mold issue at my work. They're trying to remediate it, but it's pumping out right at my desk." And I'm like, important, red flag, important, right? So we're reducing inflammation. Your symptoms are getting better, but that's the root cause in those cases, right? Like, so then when you add in these foods back, the symptoms flare back up because we never actually eliminated the source of the issue to begin with, right? So again, we want to know as much as we can in terms of environmental stuff too.
Yep. And then with chronic dieting, I feel like this is always worth correlating because it's so common, unfortunately. Chronic dieting and undereating can be gut disruption in and of itself, because again, you can eat very high quality foods and have good variety and all those things, but still have a low or imbalanced gut microbiome and digestive capacity. And it can lead to slower motility. It can lead to constipation. It can lead to low diversity in the gut still because it's just not enough. It can lead to higher stress on the body, which obviously further suppresses digestion or can create gut barrier and lining integrity issues, reduced enzyme and bile stimulation, low stomach acid, low gastric acid output, like all of these different things can play a role with chronic dieting, even if you feel like your food quality is really good. So you have to eat good quality food and variety and enough of it.
And those things are also stressors on your system, because a lot of times I think people are like, oh, no, I don't feel stressed. And it's like, okay, you don't feel stressed, but we have the allostatic load. We have this stress burden, and this scale keeps being piled on, right? And there's stressors in our life that we can't remove or that we don't want to remove, like our kids and challenges at work and things like that. Then we tack on social media and perceived stressors. Then we tack on air pollutants. Then we tack on food toxins. Then we tack, right? And all these things keep compiling until boom, now these switches turn on in terms of inflammation or autoimmune issues or whatever. We want to look and kind of like reverse engineer all of that and just turn the dials we can. Well, many women that we work with are always on this yo-yo diet cycle, or they're super over exercising in terms of intensity. And they just can be easy dials for us to turn. You know, adding more nutrients is an easy one to turn. And if you're not eating very much, how are we moving the food and the poop through your system? So that's one of the things I think that's part of the slow motility thing with the GLPs, is because they're just simply eating so little that the poop isn't moving through them. Just like a bodybuilder who's at 800 calories or something ridiculous, they also have those same types of issues just because they're not eating enough. So I think there's multiple reasons why. But generally speaking, we want to reduce stress, and chronic dieting and undereating is a stressor.
Yes. And then when we talk about, okay, beyond the gut, right? If there are all of these things going on in the gut, how can that downstream have other impacts? And we talked about the hormones, right? Just the downstream effect of metabolism and clearance of hormones, specifically with estrogen, that can lead to more PMS-like symptoms, irritability, fluid retention, heavy periods, right? Just more symptomatic estrogen dominant patterns. But the histamine and immune reactivity is a big one, because if the gut is inflamed or irritated or just imbalanced or more permeable with that gut lining than it should be, that histamine burden can increase, right? So that's where you might see more skin presentation of symptoms, sinuses, itching, anxiety, right? Obviously the mood stuff that we talked about. That's going to go beyond just bloating or food sensitivity or intolerance. Now it's starting to present in other ways.
I know that every person is different, but can you talk about that a little bit in terms of, like, I know you've had a couple of clients recently who have these like crazy immune flare-ups. So you don't necessarily take the same protocol approach that you would with somebody who doesn't, because you need to calm down their immune system first.
Yeah.
Can you give us like a basic on what does that look like?
Yeah, it depends on the person. So like there are times where medications can help with that. So low-dose naltrexone is a big one. Rapamycin is another one. And again, we have medical providers. I am not a medical provider. I do not prescribe these things, but our medical partner is great for helping with these things when navigating protocols. But sometimes if someone has a heightened or overactive immune system, and we know that through the symptoms and the way that they're presenting, we have to calm that down, because if we don't calm that down and then I try to detox you, detoxing is going to be extremely difficult and uncomfortable and likely unbearable for you, where your symptoms are all going to come pouring out, and then you're going to be like,
we're stirring up stuff as we're getting things out of your system,
which is not abnormal, right? Detoxing can generally be uncomfortable for the average person without immunity issue or immune system issues. We have clients that range from headaches and feeling a little bit more cold all the way up to like some vomiting, right? Where like that's signs that we need to slow down and titrate more slowly in those scenarios. And sometimes you don't know until you're in it, which obviously is not fun for the person. But
for the detoxing or the kill phase itself,
right?
We're talking about.
So with that immune reactivity, we have to calm that down and then titrate detoxing very slowly, especially if somebody comes to us having dieted extremely for a long time and having all these food sensitivity issues. And they're like, I've been avoiding gluten, dairy, soy, all these things for all these years. And it's like, okay, that can actually create more of an issue, right? Because once we reintroduce these things, your system's going to react. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So we want to calm that, lower the likelihood of more reactivity, and then titrate detox very slowly, because your system isn't just ready to go.
Which stinks. It might take longer. It likely will take longer for a person who has that. Longer of having to follow a more restrictive diet, and I say restrictive not in terms of food amount, right? Because we talked about we don't want to be at low calories, but in terms of, okay, we need to eat really whole foods for a while, or be on an AIP diet or something like that for a while. So it might be more painful, but then we're doing it in a way where we can treat the underlying issue without it stirring up the more autoimmune issue, like immune reactivity, I should say.
Right. And the flush protocol that we take clients through, right? So chronic dieting, right, is a big piece of what we do. But that metabolic insufficiency can lead to inflammation itself because the body can't switch back and forth between fat burning system, sugar burning system, right? So when there's friction or a traffic jam from inflammation, that flush initially is intended to slow down that traffic jam. We're putting lots of fiber in, right? There's like 60 grams of fiber in this protocol, right? But we also
micronutrients, we're pumping up fruits and vegetables as much as possible. Right. We're reducing inflammation. We're actually taking out workouts, which is obviously not my methodology for overall health. We're reducing protein for those couple weeks, but it's specifically because we're giving your liver a break. We're trying to get your gallbladder and or liver, if you don't have gallbladder, to pump out more bile. We're trying to actually get the toxic stuff out, and then we're adding supplements so that your body packages it up to poop it out. So we're shipping it out so that it's not recirculating in your system, because that would cause worse symptoms, right? So it's a very, very strategic thing. It's not just I'm going to take a juice detox for my liver.
So we're slowing down that traffic jam with all of this fiber, and so we can get it up really fast. We're also scraping the walls of the gut lining with certain supplements so that things can move through quickly. And then when we do that, we're adding tons of water, right? So that water is really high. And then we're stimulating the thyroid so everything stays moving so you can push all of that fiber out. So it's just important to understand that detoxing in and of itself is not, to Jess's point, like just a juice cleanse, right? So if we're stimulating that, there's also lots of fruit juices in the flush protocol, right? So the water's high, we're keeping everything moving without causing a bunch of chaos. And then we can get efficient and get energy quickly from those simple sugars. And then if we can get really efficient at this one pathway, which then in turn reduces friction and reduces the inflammation and reduces the need for more insulin and lowers triglycerides, right? And takes pressure off the system. And then that calms the immunologic activity because we're calming all this inflammation, right? And we're getting insulin and glucose down so it has less sugar to run on, because an active immune system runs on sugar, right? So many of these women avoid carbs. I'm sensitive to carbs. I've been keto all these years, right?
And again, that sounds like I just want to, my mind 10 years ago would be like, well, then that's stupid because juice is carbs. And if you give me just juice, that's sugar and that's going to make my glucose go up. Well, hold on. We're doing it for a specific temporary purpose. We're stimulating bile production. We're increasing polyphenols and specific vitamins and minerals. Your liver then and we're reducing inflammation. Your liver then is firing on all cylinders. So when we go back to increasing protein, increasing strength training, eating carbs like a normal person, your body actually regulates better.
Yeah. And if you don't have insulin sensitivity and you go keto, right, which a lot of people do, your body's just going to convert protein to sugar, right? So we have to look at all of these pieces of the puzzle, but in the context specifically of immune reactivity, we have to calm that down or detoxing is going to be horrific, right? A lot of that is obviously the physiological piece in the right order of operations, but it's also the psychological piece, because if I just throw somebody into detox that's not ready, they're not going to trust me, right? They're going to be hesitant about anything that I recommend. So it's so important for practitioners and providers. And one of the things that we stress heavily within Fueled across all things, not just functional protocols, is setting the right expectation. Because if I tell somebody, hey, you can do this if this is your choice, these are the pros and cons, and this is what the outcome of that choice will be, whether it's to take a supplement, to not take it, to do a protocol, to not do a protocol, to pursue fat loss instead of addressing all of your thyroid and gut concerns that you came to me for, that's your choice and that's fine. But this is how this is going to go. And as long as we respect that relationship with our our clients so much. And we want to make sure that we're setting those expectations. So you're not like, wait, you told me I could do fat loss and I didn't lose 40 pounds last month. Like, what happened? That's our job to help you see that full picture and understand the why behind what we're recommending, because that's going to make you way more likely to see it through, right? Even if it's not immediately driving the outcome that you want, it will later, right? And it's setting us up for success. But
like just understanding the why behind it and understanding the pros and cons. So at the end of the day, it's your choice. And if you choose, nope, I just want to prioritize physique right now. Okay, as long as you know that that's adding a stressor to this other thing where you told me you have symptoms, I want you to know it. And if it's your choice, I'm going to try to help you do it in the healthiest way. But at the end of the day, it's your choice.
Yep. So in this context, right, a lot of times if clients feel like they're left with like, all right, I want to lose weight, but my gut is horrible. It's like, okay, it's kind of why we've restructured internally the way that we have, because I'm like, let's just get healthy, and weight loss is going to be a byproduct of your choices that you make and the improvements that we make with you during this time. And then hell yeah, we'll just manipulate macros, focus on physique, build tons of muscle and all these things. But I know for me that like, I could not get enough out of the gym when I was really in the depths of my healing. Prior to my healing, I was so bloated, so uncomfortable. It was all I could think about. It was negatively impacting my mood, my motivation, everything. And that sounds dramatic, but you don't know until you're in it and you're living that. I was uncomfortable going to the gym, and it was like really impacting everything. Not to mention just generally, if I'm inflamed, like pursuing fat loss is not going to be very fun or as effective as it could be. So you have to consider the physiological, obviously what we're going through, and the psychological component of all of that, and what you decide to follow through on. So anyway,
your issues were very thyroid related. So I feel like that's another one on our list of, okay, we went over kind of, there's a hormone overlap, there's a histamine overlap, there's a huge thyroid and cortisol overlap. I feel like everybody now is coming to us and saying, oh, I think I just have cortisol bloat. So what do I need to do for that? I'm taking like whatever supplement has been sold to me on Instagram. Those things, if we can help heal your gut, there's these trickle downs to these other things. So I don't know if you want to get deep into this or how much time we have, but
yeah, I mean, really, when it comes to the gut, we're looking at, and women ask this a lot, what do you see on my gut test that tells me I have thyroid issues? And it's not like there's this thyroid red flag on the GI map. Yeah. But it's really
thyroid is a trickle down, just like insulin resistance is a trickle down of this chronic inflammation.
Right. So I had inflammation, I had low stomach acid, I had gut dysbiosis, and I was eventually diagnosed with Hashimoto's. I had horrible PMS symptoms, diagnosed with PCOS. So I had all these things, but we have to look at like, maybe you could have the perfect diet, but again, if you're not absorbing the nutrients coming in, that's going to impact thyroid hormone production and signaling and conversion and transport and cell response, right? So you could even have completely adequate thyroid signaling and production, but if your cells aren't responding, it's irrelevant, right? You're still not using the tools effectively that your body has access to.
And you're a great example. Like you have a family, other people that are in your immediate family have thyroid issues.
Yeah.
I think that this is a great example too, because I have also talked to a lot of women who are like, nope, it's genetic. My cholesterol is genetic. Can't do anything. This is what it is. Okay. That means you have this switch that might be more likely to turn on. If you and I have the same bad inputs that aren't healthy over time, yours might turn on faster than mine because you have this genetic predisposition. That does not mean we cannot still improve it and make it healthier through your lifestyle.
Yeah. And does it suck that it's harder for you or that you're more prone to that? Sure. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
1,000%. Yeah. But what is within our control? Because there's still a lot within our control. I just don't want any of you who do have a genetic predisposition, I don't want you to feel like it's a lost cause or you're hopeless or it's not worth it for you. It is, you can still feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. And, my dad was a good example of this, where he had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and he just wrote it off of like genetic. My dad had the same thing. And it's like, no, respectfully, you both eat a shit ton of fast food. You're not mobile. You make horrible nutrition choices in your life, and you probably drink too much, right? Like maybe there is a genetic predisposition, but you are like sitting down.
We're turning the trigger on. We're turning that light switch on and saying, yep, here we go. We're going to flick it on with all these unhealthy inputs.
And then again, cortisol, stress signaling, a gut that's inflamed, infected, constipated, irritated, all the things keeps the immune system engaged, which is going to in turn add to the stress load, as we talked about. with everything else. And sometimes people are like, but I'm not stressed in my life. Like, I work from home and I don't have kids. It doesn't mean you can't have a stress burden on your body through these other things. That are trickling down, right? Because again, everything is connected. It could just be microbial imbalance. It could be the immune activation. It could be poor sleep from some of the symptoms that you're having with your gut. That's in turn creating other issues and circadian dysfunction, right? Like blood sugar instability from poor digestion or erratic eating, right? I'm a business owner. I have shit to do. I don't have time to eat. I don't eat until 5 p.m. and then I take all my calories in. That can create a stress burden on your body, right? So over time, that can contribute to fluid retention, appetite regulation, disrupted sleep, obviously an imbalanced gut, poor recovery, difficulty leaning out and losing body fat with metabolic downregulation from inflammation or whatever other things are creating this. So again, if your cortisol is high, I'm not saying it's not, but sometimes we just have to look further, right? And liver, gut, immune activation, and your lifestyle are always going to be the things that we want to look at ultimately. So again, but when it comes to body composition overall, if you feel like you're doing everything right and something's off or your body's not responding, it could be simply that you're not actually in a calorie deficit, you're not moving enough, you're not consistent enough, you're not giving it enough time, and you have unrealistic expectations, all the basics, right? We're going to check those boxes first. But then we're going to look at if gut function is compromised, body composition intentions, it certainly can create an environment that's less responsive, whether it's...
So you might have to, a calorie deficit still works at the end of the day, but you might have to cut uncomfortably low to achieve said deficit. Whereas if we fix this stuff first, maybe you don't have to suffer so much through it. Or if you're trying to build muscle, I use her a lot as an example because she's so healthy, but like my sister-in-law trains her butt off. She tracks her protein. She goes to bed at 8:30 every night like a boss. But she has a really hard time. Like if we did the same stuff, I'm very much lucky, I would say. I would put that in air quotes, but my body responds better with muscle building and she busts her ass trying to build muscle. But I think it's because there's some of this underlying stuff going on that has gone untreated, and it might not be so hard for her if we could clean some of this stuff up first, right? So again, the body composition thing is not that you can't still achieve body composition goals, because you can. And we do that for lots of women, but you might be having to walk a little bit of a more resistant process through it.
Yep, absolutely. And again, we want to look at appetite and cravings and training response and nutrients, everything overall with fat loss. But again, doesn't mean you can't pursue it. It's just...
And the goal of any of these protocols is to heal your gut and or to reduce inflammation. It is not to lose weight. So if somebody goes through one of these protocols and they say, oh, I don't think it's working because I didn't lose weight, I'm going to say, nope. We're not trying to be at low calories. We're not in a deficit. This is not the intention. However, if someone is super inflamed and bloated and water retention is one of these side effects, I have seen people be like, oh my gosh, immediately I feel less puffy. Immediately I feel leaner. But it's just because we've reduced the inflammatory burden. It's not because they've actually lost body fat in the process. It's like a water retention inflammation thing. So I have seen that quite a bit, where usually it gets worse before it gets better. Usually the first 4 to 5 days kind of suck in terms of detoxy symptoms. For some of the worst cases I've seen, the first couple weeks may really stink. But then on the other side, they're like, whoa, I can't remember the last time I had this much energy, or my sleep was this good. Or I mentioned this for myself. Wow, I have way more focus at work. I feel like when I was in high school and I could study again because I didn't realize I had all this brain fog stuff going on. All of those things are on the other side of this discomfort once we get stuff out of your body.
Yep. So what does the gut need? It needs enough stomach acid to break things down. It needs sufficient enzyme and bile support, motility. I think we've gotten that with daily elimination, adequate total calorie intake, protein, nutrients, fiber, diversity over time, obviously, unless we pull back for a second to improve tolerance, microbial balance, gut barrier support, less chemical or toxin disruption, alcohol, processed foods, things like that. And then a sequence that matches your total case if there's something that requires intervention.
If you're not at this place where you're ready to, okay, I want to figure everything out, drink more water. Perhaps if you're drinking a gallon of water a day, please add an electrolyte. pack it along with it. Drink plenty of water, eat more fiber from real whole foods, play in the produce section and get a variety of fruits and veggies. Cruciferous vegetables and bitter herbs can be really, really good for naturally helping with some of this liver clearance and everything that we're talking about in terms of supporting bile production.
But again, if digestive capacity is reduced, you probably have to address
that first. Correct. But I'm saying, like, if you start there, with those few things and reduce stress, add recovery. If you're somebody who works out 6 days a week, you don't need to be doing all that. But do those things first and see what happens. And then if those issues persist, okay, cool. Now here's our next step.
Yep. So bloating doesn't mean you just have food intolerance, right? We don't want to just continue to cut trigger foods forever and never identify the pattern or the driving problem. Taking probiotics randomly off the internet, respectfully, like things like digestive enzymes can be great, or whatever the case is. But I mean, you can even overdo that, honestly. So if you want to support your gut, do it through food, to Jess's point, with variety and adequate intake and all of those things. And then we can add supplements if we need them. Trying to repair the gut or improve detox when you're constipated is not going to be fun. Healthy eating is not enough for your gut. Long-term chronic under-eating can absolutely be a stressor and create strain and imbalance in the gut. And then we don't want to just look at like supplements that help. We want to look at what's the symptom? How long has this been going on? What's the history? What does the blood work show us about how effective your body is utilizing things? Actually finding where the bottleneck is, what the driving root cause is, and then obviously using the GI map as a tool to show us the terrain and the full picture so that we know what the problem is, what order we need to go through things in. And again, just using it as data to optimize and then figuring out the driving factor so that we know what got us there and we can avoid that from being an endless cycle for you long term in the future. So I know this was a longer one and it's so hard to hit on every piece, every case, every gut pattern. It's just obviously not possible in this amount of time, but hopefully that gives you some good context on symptoms when it comes to your gut, but also how gut can impact other things in the body that you might not have thought were correlated, and then what the GI map actually tells us and why it's so helpful, and then how we actually utilize those protocols and how important the order of operations is, which I know I beat a dead horse. I probably talk about that in my content endlessly, but it truly is so important. So, you want a practitioner that understands these labs and these protocols, but also somebody who understands lifestyle and choices and habits and the impact that's at the end of the day, what's driving all of this. So we want to pair all of that together. And then if you want physique goals or have physique goals as well, and you want to optimize there, we have to balance it all, the functional piece and the physique manipulation component, and that can be done. But if you're blaming external factors for lack of results, there might truly be something underlying that is making it more difficult metabolically for you to create a calorie deficit. But you can address those things and you do not have to be married to these symptoms. I always get frustrated when I see like hot girls have bloat on TikTok and I'm like, oh my gosh, why are we promoting this narrative? That does not.
I used to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I remember being like, hey guys, because I think it is important for women to know the difference between bloat and body fat.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, you're clumping these things together as if they're one thing. They're not one thing. If I look super lean in the morning and then I'm bloated at night after a day of feeding my body stuff that it's not used to, that does not mean I need to freak out about the scale going up 5 pounds, right? Like, so I used to show those images of my stomach bloated to be like, hello, bloat, not body fat, right? Because tomorrow morning, if I'm lean again, it's not body fat. However, I remember Jill messaging me, and we were already friends and working together and everything, but her being like, yo, stop promoting that because you know that's not healthy either. Like, your gut doesn't have to be like that. And I'm like, I know, but you hear my point? Like, because women will freak out and think I need to go on a diet because they're bloating. And meanwhile, that's adding another stressor to their system versus, okay, let's address the bloat as a separate thing. So a lot of times I think you describe it as like, if you're trying to have physique goals and heal functional or gut issues or hormone issues at the same time, it's like you're driving in 2 different directions. You're driving to New York and California at the same time. That's impossible. You're not going to really get very far in either direction. So let's visit one destination first, really execute it well. Then let's drive to the other destination and kick butt, and we'll help you hit your physique goals, and it'll just be easier for you.
Absolutely. So hope that was helpful. We will continue this series through a couple of different patterns that I think will be helpful. But as always, if you have questions or requests, you know where to find us on Instagram. Shoot us a DM. And that is all for this episode. And we'll see you guys next time.